Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going way back in time to the late 1700s to explore the Kingdom of Nepal.
Oh, wow. Sounds fascinating.
It is. And what makes it even more interesting is we'll be using this incredible account by Father Giuseppe, a prefect of the Roman mission.
He was actually there, right?
Yeah, lived there for years. His observations, as communicated by John Shore, offer us this incredible peek into a world that's...
I was going to say like a lost world almost.
Right. Totally. Beautiful and full of political intrigue.
I love that.
Me too. So, are you ready to jump in?
I am. Let's go.
Okay. So he kicks things off by talking about the Valley of Nepal being this incredible enclosed plain almost 900 miles around.
Wow.
I know, right? Ringed by mountains and just bursting with life.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, so it was really like that back then.
From his descriptions, it seems... So imagine this fertile valley dotted with all these thriving cities and towns.
Okay, yeah.
All nestled within this dramatic mountain backdrop.
Almost like nature created this stage for all the
events that unfolded there.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's a good way to put it.
He specifically mentions three major cities: Kathmandu, Lillipatan, and Patgan.
Okay, so what made each of them so unique?
Well, Kathmandu was kind of the main hub, bustling population and impressive 18,000 houses.
Wow, that's a lot for that time period.
I know, right? And then Lillipatan is where Father Giuseppe actually lived.
Okay.
It was even bigger than Kathmandu with nearly twice as many homes. And then to the east, there was Patgan, another busy center, just adding to the vibrancy of the valley.
So it was a pretty happening place.
It sounds like it. But what really struck me was how he described their urban planning.
Oh, you mean like their infrastructure and stuff?
Yeah, exactly. He talks about paved streets, public wells, and even these palace.
Palace. What are those?
Public rest houses for travelers.
Oh, like roadside inns?
Kind of, but more basic. Providing shelter for people traveling between the cities.
That's so thoughtful. I wonder if they had them in Europe back then.
Probably not as common.
Or as well maintained.
Yeah, good point. He really emphasizes how well planned these cities were.
Like, how so?
Well, take the public wells, for example. They had these sophisticated drainage systems.
Oh, so they weren't just like holes in the ground.
No, they had clever ways to channel rainwater away to prevent contamination and keep the cities clean.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. They were arguably more advanced than many European systems at the time, which often struggled with sanitation.
Wow, I never would have thought.
Yeah, and then there's this amazing detail about the public square outside Kathmandu.
Oh, yeah, I read about that. What was it like?
Well, imagine this massive reservoir, 2,000 feet long on each side.
Whoa.
I know, right? It's hard to even picture something that big.
It really is. It kind of makes you wonder how they built something like that back then.
Right. It speaks to their level of engineering and civic planning. They weren't just focused on survival.
Yeah.
There was this clear emphasis on creating a well-functioning and aesthetically pleasing urban environment.
Makes you wonder if European architects ever heard about these designs and if they, got any inspiration.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it's definitely food for thought.
Yeah, it is.
But it wasn't just the physical infrastructure that was impressive. Father Giuseppe also describes a rich tapestry of religious practices in Nepal.
Oh, yeah, I remember that part.
Yeah.
He talks about the Buddhist faith and Brahmanic Hinduism, right?
Yeah, exactly. Two main religions. And the Buddhist faith, which he compares to Tibetan Buddhism.
Okay.
That's particularly interesting.
And what did he say about them?
Well, he talks about the monks living in these large monasteries. They all wear red woolen clothing, and they're supposed to practice celibacy, though he kind of hints that they weren't always successful.
Really?
Yeah. And then he describes this month-long festival they call Yatra.
What's that?
It's this giant chariot procession with music and revelry.
It sounds pretty wild. So was it like a religious pilgrimage or something?
More like a celebration honoring their deities and all that.
Okay. So it's interesting because he compares them to Tibetan Buddhists, right?
Right.
But this festival thing sounds a lot less...
Less austere. Yeah, it does highlight a key difference. While both emphasize monastic life and spiritual enlightenment, the Buddhist faith seems to have had this more festive and...
Yeah, maybe less strict.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
And then he contrasts this with what he calls the purer form of Hinduism.
Future.
Yeah, practiced in Nepal untouched by Islamic influences, you see.
Oh, so like more traditional.
Exactly. More closely resembling the ancient forms of the religion.
Fascinating. So would it be fair to say that Nepal offered a glimpse into a more, ancient version of Hinduism?
It seems that way. Father Giuseppe's observations suggest that Nepalese Hinduism retained elements that may have been lost or transformed in other parts of the subcontinent because of all that cultural and religious exchange.
I see.
And then there's this part where he talks about the sheer number of temples in their cities.
Yeah, I remember that. He was pretty blown away by that.
Oh, he was?
Yeah.
He claims there were more temples in their towns than even in the most populous European cities.
It's hard to imagine.
I know, right? And it wasn't just the quantity. It was the quality that really caught his attention.
Oh, yeah.
He describes some with gilded copper domes and these super intricate carvings.
Wow, so they were beautiful then.
Oh, yeah. Even the small temples were beautifully crafted. He even suggested that they could serve as inspiration for European architecture.
Wow.
Right. It's like picturing these grand temples glittering in the sun with all their intricate details and craftsmanship.
It really makes you wonder what happened to them.
I know. It's a shame we can't see them exactly as he did.
Yeah, lost to time or to...
Or to the conflicts that would soon engulf the kingdom.
And speaking of conflicts...
Oh, yeah.
He mentions this local belief about hidden treasures.
Hidden treasures?
Yeah, buried beneath some of these temples.
Like buried treasure.
Really?
Yeah. And there's even this story about the temple at Tolu. Have you heard about this one?
No, tell me about it.
So this temple was believed to hold vast riches. And it wasn't just like folklore either.
King Jayaprakash Malla of Kathmandu was desperate for funds to pay his troops, so he actually dug beneath this very temple.
Like a real-life treasure hunt.
Exactly. It's like something out of an Indiana Jones movie.
Did you find anything?
He did. Father Giuseppe says Jayaprakash Malla discovered this hidden vault filled with riches. But before he could even claim all his newfound treasure,
oh no!
His rival, Prithvi Narayan Shah, the king of Gorkha,
oh, I've heard of him.
seized the location.
Are you serious?
Yeah, talk about bad timing.
So there's Prithvi Narayan Shah. He sounds like he was a real...
Oh, he was a force to be reckoned with. This incident highlights the intense power struggles happening in Nepal at that time.
Yeah, it wasn't just about land or resources. It was about...
survival and dominance.
Wow.
Yeah, and this whole incident with the treasure vault seems to have been a major turning point in their rivalry.
It sounds like it pushed them closer to war.
Exactly.
So Nepal wasn't exactly a peaceful paradise, huh?
Not exactly.
This incident with the treasure hints at a much larger struggle for power.
Right. And Father Giuseppe also mentions this mysterious stone inscription found in the royal palace of Kathmandu.
What? Really?
Yeah, it was covered in characters from all sorts of languages, including a line of Roman letters that nobody could decipher.
Wow, that's so intriguing. It's like a puzzle from the past.
It really is.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder who else might have ventured into this remote kingdom and
left their mark.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have these beautiful cities, this mix of religions,
right,
hints of hidden treasures, mysterious inscriptions.
Right.
Where does the story go from here?
Well, this is where things take a bit of a darker turn. You see, Nepal at that time wasn't a unified kingdom. There were 3 separate kingdoms, each with its own king, and they were constantly...
vying for power.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. So it was their own internal conflict that led to their downfall.
In a way, yes. They were so busy fighting amongst themselves
that they didn't see the bigger threat.
Exactly. And Prithvi Narayan Shah was a master at exploiting this weakness.
So he was clever then?
Oh, extremely prized. Father Giuseppe explains how he strategically forged alliances with these mountain chiefs, using their strength to bolster his own forces. He also had this network of Brahmins that he used to spread his influence.
So it sounds like he was a shrewd political operator, not just a
military leader. He was a master strategist.
Wow. From what you're describing, it seems like Prithvi Narayan Shah was a really complex character.
He was a cunning strategist who knew how to manipulate people to get what he wanted. And his ambition would soon lead to one of the most gripping episodes in Nepalese history.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat.
The Siege of Kirtipur.
This sounds like a turning point in the story. Tell me more about Kirtipur.
Well, it was a strategic hilltop town. It played a key role in the conflict between the kingdoms. When its inhabitants were abandoned by their own king,
oh no,
they turned to Jayaprakash Malla of Kathmandu for help, inadvertently dragging him into the conflict.
Wow, so everyone was getting caught up in this web of alliances and
betrayals.
Yeah.
It's a recipe for disaster.
So what happened at Kirtipur?
Well, this led to this fierce battle where Prithvi Narayan Shah himself was nearly killed and was forced to retreat.
Wow, he lost.
He did. It was a major setback for his campaign and a testament to the tenacity of the Kirtipur defenders.
That's incredible. I can only imagine how intense that battle must have been.
Oh, it was brutal. But this defeat only fueled Prithvi Narayan Shah's determination to conquer Nepal.
So what did he do next?
He couldn't take Kirtipur by force, so he resorted to a much more brutal tactic.
Oh, no. What did he do?
He blockaded the entire Kathmandu Valley.
What?
Yeah, attempted to starve the population into submission.
That's awful, to think of all those people trapped inside with no way to get food or supplies.
It was a chilling demonstration of his ruthlessness.
So what happened? Anyone try to get supplies in?
Anyone caught smuggling supplies, even the most basic necessities, were executed without mercy.
That's just heartbreaking. It sounds like his ambition had completely taken over.
It had. But that wasn't the end of it. Prithvi Narayan Shah launched a second siege of Kirtipur.
Another one?
This time led by his brother Suraparatna.
Okay, so what was different this time?
They had a secret weapon, a traitor from Lilith Patton.
A traitor?
Who helped the Gorkha forces capture the town.
Wow. It seems like everyone was playing this dangerous game of intrigue and
deception.
Yeah, so what happened after Kirtipur fell? Did Prithvi Narayan Shah finally achieve his goal?
He did, but the fall of Kirtipur was a turning point in the conflict, not just strategically, but also in terms of the brutality that was unleashed.
Oh, no. What happened?
Prithvi Narayan Shah was enraged by the town's resistance, so he ordered this horrific punishment.
What did he do?
He ordered the mutilation of the inhabitants. Their noses and lips were cut off.
Oh, my God.
Even those of infants.
That's just barbaric.
The town was renamed Naskatapur, the town of cut noses. It was a chilling act of cruelty meant to instill fear and crush any further opposition.
I can't believe he would do something like that.
Only those who could play wind instruments were spared.
Really?
Perhaps seen as valuable for entertaining the conquering army. Father Giuseppe's account of this event is truly heartbreaking.
It must have been horrifying for him to witness that.
Absolutely. The fall of Kirtipur really marks a significant shift in the story.
It went from a political struggle to just pure
brutality.
Yeah, the human cost of war is just so
devastating.
Yeah.
And that sets a very somber tone for the next chapter in our deep dive.
Oh, I can't wait to hear what happens next. Stay tuned as we explore the final stages of Prithvi Narayan Shah's rise to power and the fate of those who stood in his way. That fall of Kirtipur, it's just such a haunting tale. You know, it's hard to believe that Prithvi Narayan Shah could be so cruel. What happened next? Did the other kingdoms just surrender?
Well, the remaining kings, they were in a really tough spot. I mean, with Kirtipur fallen and Prithvi Narayan Shah's brutality on full display, their options were really limited.
It's almost like watching one of those Greek tragedies. You know how it's going to end, but you can't help but hope for a different outcome.
Right, totally. Father Giuseppe tells us that Prithvi Narayan Shah then turned his attention to Lilith Patton.
Lilith Patton.
Yeah, exploiting all that fear and chaos that had gripped the valley after the whole Kirtipur massacre.
So Lilith Patton, the city where Father Giuseppe actually lived, that fell next.
Sadly, yes. The king of Lilith Patton, he kind of got caught in a web of his own making.
What do you mean?
Well, earlier in the conflict, he had actually considered joining forces with Prithvi Narayan Shah.
Seriously?
Yeah, thinking he could somehow benefit from the Gorkha king's growing power.
That seems like a huge miscalculation.
It was. And by the time Prithvi Narayan Shah set his sights on Lilith Patton, the king found himself completely isolated.
Oh.
Yeah, his former allies were either defeated or too afraid to help.
So it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. It's a classic example of playing with fire and getting burned.
It really makes you think about those moments in history where one wrong decision can lead to such devastating consequences.
It's true. And it's such a contrast from that sophisticated city that Father Giuseppe described earlier,
right,
with its bustling streets and thriving population, and to think it all came crashing down.
Because of one man's ambition.
It's a tragedy, for sure. And then there's Botkan, the last kingdom standing.
Botkan.
Yeah, and their fate was tied to Lilith Patton's in a way that really shows the tragic consequences of misjudging Prithvi Narayan Shah's intentions.
So they also made the mistake of trusting him.
Well, yes, but in a different way.
Yeah.
The king of Botkan initially tried to stay neutral, playing both sides.
Okay.
Hoping to maintain his kingdom's independence while Prithvi Narayan Shah was busy with the other kingdoms.
I see.
But as the Gorkha king's power grew, Botkan's king found himself with no allies left.
Like he was trapped.
Yeah, exactly. Caught between a rock and a hard place.
What a terrible situation for these kings.
It was. They watched as their kingdoms fell one by one with no way to stop it.
So what about Botkan? How did they fall?
Father Giuseppe doesn't go into a ton of detail about the actual fall of Botkan, but it's clear that they couldn't withstand Prithvi Narayan Shah's forces.
So they were defeated?
Yes. The king of Botkan was forced to flee, just like the other kings, and seek refuge elsewhere.
It's hard to imagine the chaos and despair that followed.
Right. It makes you wonder what happened to all the people.
Yeah. Did their lives just go back to normal under this new ruler?
It's tough to say for sure. Father Giuseppe focuses mostly on the politics and military side of things.
Right.
But he does give us these glimpses into the human cost of it all.
Yeah, he mentions Jayaprakash Malla dying from a wound he got in a last attempt to confront Prithvinarayan Shah.
It must have been a desperate last stand, knowing he was fighting a losing battle.
It really shows that these weren't just abstract power struggles.
No real people with families and lives were caught in the middle of all of this.
And then there's that story of the blind queen of Kathmandu.
Oh, yeah.
Forced into exile in Benares, stripped of her jewels and her royal status.
It's heartbreaking to think about.
It is. It really puts a human face on the devastating effects of these conquests.
For sure. These stories remind us that behind the grand narratives of conquest and empire building, there are always these individual stories of loss and suffering.
Right. So with the fall of these kingdoms, Prithvi Narayan Shah finally achieved his goal of unifying Nepal. What happened next? Did he rule with an iron fist or try to rebuild?
That's the million-dollar question.
Huh.
Father Giuseppe finishes up his account by briefly mentioning Prithvi Narayan Shah's successors.
Oh, right, his son.
Pratap Singh.
And then his younger brother, Bahadur Shah.
That's right. So the Gorkha dynasty was established, but whether it brought peace and stability to Nepal?
That's debatable, right?
It is. Historians still debate that Prithvi Narayan Shah definitely unified Nepal, but whether he truly brought peace?
That's a different story.
I mean, he unified them through force, through brutality. So could a kingdom built on bloodshed ever truly find lasting peace?
That's a great question, and it brings up a really important point. While Father Giuseppe's account is super valuable, he was still an outsider, right?
Looking in. His perspective was shaped by his own experiences and biases.
Yeah, he must have been horrified by the violence he witnessed, but...
But he might not have fully understood all the nuances of Nepalese society.
Right, and all the complex factors that led to these conflicts.
Exactly. And that's why it's always important to be critical of our sources.
You mean like not taking everything at face value?
Yeah, and recognizing that there are always multiple perspectives on historical events.
In this case, Father Giuseppe offers us this glimpse into a fascinating and turbulent period in Nepalese history.
Right.
But it's just one piece of the puzzle.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. So what do you think? What can we learn from all of this? This tale of ambition, betrayal, and the human cost of war.
It's not just a story from a distant past. It feels relevant even today.
You're right. The story of Prithvinarayan Shah's rise to power has valuable lessons about leadership ambition and the dangers of unchecked power.
And the consequences that come with victory?
Absolutely. The question of whether Prithvinarayan Shah was a hero or a villain.
There's no easy answer.
Not at all. History is rarely black and white. It's full of shades of gray.
Okay, so as we move on to the last part of our deep dive, let's keep all these complexities in mind. We've explored Prithvinarayan Shah's rise and the fall of those kingdoms. Now we need to consider his legacy and what it means for Nepal.
Sounds good. I'm ready.
It's amazing to think about all those cultural and architectural wonders that Father Giuseppe described. I mean, did they survive all that turmoil?
Yeah, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Father Giuseppe was clearly impressed by those beautiful temples.
Yeah, with those gilded copper domes.
Right, and the intricate carvings. He even thought they could inspire European architects.
Oh, that's a fascinating thought. I wonder if we could trace that influence, see if any European architects from that era actually incorporated any Nepalese designs.
Yeah, it'd be like an architectural treasure hunt.
I love it. But going back to Nepal, what happened to those vibrant cities, those paved streets and public wells? I mean, did Prithvinarayan Shah preserve all of that, or was it just swept away?
Well, it seems like it was a bit of both. While the historical record isn't super detailed about everyday life after the Gorkha conquest, we do know that Prithvinarayan Shah and those who came after him.
They made some changes, right?
They did. They implemented reforms to try and stabilize the unified kingdom.
So they weren't just focused on military power.
No, they understood that to really solidify their rule, they needed to create some sense of order and unity.
That makes sense.
So they standardized weights and measures.
Which helped with trade and the economy.
Exactly. And they also introduced administrative reforms to centralize their government.
So it sounds like they were really trying to establish some stability.
Yeah, after decades of conflict.
Yeah.
But it makes you wonder how the people felt about all these changes.
Right. Did they welcome the unified kingdom, or did they resent their new rulers?
It's hard to say for sure. There were probably mixed feelings. Some might have been relieved that the fighting was finally over and that there was a chance for peace.
Yeah.
But others, especially those who had suffered losses during the conflicts, they might have held on to that resentment towards the Gorkha dynasty.
Right. It makes you think about the psychological scars of war.
Yeah, even if there were improvements, it probably took a long time for people to heal from all that trauma and loss.
And let's not forget that the Gorkha dynasty itself wasn't this perfectly unified entity. There were still power struggles and conflicts within the ruling family.
Oh, absolutely. Power can do that to people.
Right. Like we mentioned, Bahadur Shah, Prithvi Narayan Shah's younger brother, he eventually became king.
Yeah.
And he was known for being pretty ruthless.
Oh, yeah, he was. And his reign ended in exile, which suggests that the cycle of violence and instability didn't just disappear overnight.
So Prithvi Narayan Shah's legacy is kind of complicated.
Very complicated.
Yeah.
On one hand, he unified Nepal and set the stage for a stronger kingdom. But he did it through brutal means, you know?
Yeah, he left a lot of pain and suffering in his wake.
And that's what makes history so fascinating.
It's full of these contradictions.
Exactly. It's not just a simple story of good guys and bad guys.
Right. There's so much nuance.
It challenges us to think critically and to try to understand the decisions people made within their historical context.
Well, this deep dive has been quite a journey. We started with Father Giuseppe's vivid descriptions of Nepal.
Right.
Then we explored those power struggles that led to Prithvi Narayan Shah's rise. And now we're left pondering his legacy and the impact of his actions.
It's amazing how these stories from the past can still resonate with us today.
I think that's the power of history. It reminds us that we're all part of this larger human story.
And that the choices we make today can have ripple effects for generations to come.
That's a powerful thought. So as we wrap up this exploration of 18th century Nepal, I want to leave you with this. What lessons can we take away from all of this? How can we use these insights to understand leadership ambition and the consequences of conflict in our own time?
I think those are questions worth reflecting on. And I hope this deep dive has encouraged you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning from the past.
I agree. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey through history. Until next time, keep those minds curious.